We all have a story, don't we? And in many ways, confession is one of those very first steps that each and every one of us makes in order to experience the power of the cross. You know, they say that confession is a lot like if a farmer is preparing his field to plant seed and bear a harvest, the first step is to clean up that field. As he walks his acreage and he finds boulders and garbage and overgrown weeds, the first thing he does or she does is to uproot those weeds, to remove those stumps, to take out those boulders so that that field is able to be harvested. In many ways, confession does just that. It comes to a point in our life where we got to say, I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this anymore. I can't do it on my own. I need a Savior. I need Jesus, the one who says that he's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And the fact of the matter is, because of the cross, Jesus can turn our state of loneliness and maybe desperation and despair and pain. He turns that into a whole relationship. He turns our pain into healing. He turns our despair into hope. He turns our addictions into freedom. He turns our hopelessness into hope because he died on a cross for you and I. Why? Because we need a Savior. Jesus, in the last week of his life, the Passion Week, he's in a garden. It's called the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's with his closest companions, his disciples. These are the ones he did life with. He had told them over and over again that there would come a point where he would give up his life, sacrifice his life, die on a cross. They didn't really understand it. They didn't really understand and comprehend exactly what that meant. But there they are in the garden. And Jesus knows these are the last hours of his life. He's in absolute, complete agony, sorrow, grief. He's filled with anxiety. He brings Peter, James, and John really close to him. He begins to pray and call out to his Father in heaven, Father, if there's any way you can take this most vile cup of suffering away from me, could you do it? Please, Father, but, Father, not what I want. Not what I want, but what you want. Not my will, but your will. He knew that he would need to die on a cross and be nailed so that you and I could sit here over 2,000 years ago and find the forgiveness of sin and find hope where there is hopelessness. He knew he would need to die the most humiliating death so that that could happen today. His disciples keep falling asleep on him. He can't believe it. That they're falling asleep on him, and it's one of the darkest hours of his life. He tries to get them up, but they keep falling asleep. And as he's talking to them, trying to help them understand what is about to happen, just as he's talking, he sees his betrayer walk in the garden. His name is Judas Iscariot. Judas was one of his disciples who behind closed doors betrayed his master for a month's worth of wage, for a bag of shekels. He set it all up. He told his band of soldiers that the person I go and give a kiss to in greeting, he's the guy you want. And so as Judas walks in the garden with, scholars say 200, 300, 400 people, this was not just a small group. Swords and batons, ready for battle. And Judas walks in, Master! And he goes and he gives him the greeting, and Jesus says, Judas, do what you need to do. I know why you're here. And as the soldiers see him tending to Jesus, they grab him, and even in that moment, they physically rough him up, so much so that Peter, one of his closest disciples, reacts. He's thinking to himself, get your hands off of him. Do you know who you're talking to? Do you know who you're mishandling? He's Jesus. They don't care. And Peter, in anger and in response, takes out his sword and slices off one of those soldiers' ears. And Jesus, in many ways, rebukes him. Put that sword away, Peter. Don't you remember that when I came into Jerusalem on a colt, I came not to wage war, but I came in peace. He goes over to his enemy, the soldier who is about to tie him up, and he heals his ear. You would think that even in that moment, these guys would realize, boy, this is just no ordinary man. This is potentially the King of the Jews. He's the King of Kings. He's Messiah. He's Christ. He's who the prophet said would come. But they take him just the same. As they take him out of the garden, sadly, his disciples disperse. They go and find hideaways. They have a feeling this isn't going to turn good. They're scared for their own lives. But Peter, for whatever reason, kind of follows the next steps in a distance and watches what is about to succumb Jesus. They take Jesus before the religious leaders. And the religious leaders start asking him and bombarding him with all sorts of questions, accusing him of all sorts of things, but the accusations, they're not adding up. But amidst all of the cross-examination, Jesus doesn't say a word. Finally, one of the leaders says, "Who do you say that you are? Are you truly saying that you are the Son of God?" And he says, "It is who you say I am. I am Jesus, the King of the Jews, the Son of the living God." Oh. Well, in the crowd, blasphemy! Who but God could say such a thing? Bring him to Pilate. And so they bring Jesus to Pilate. And it is in this very moment where a decision is to be made whether this Jesus who claims to be the King of the Jews would be crucified, the most humiliating death. As this is all happening, Peter keeps following. In fact, Peter's in the market and he's surrounded around others and keeping himself warm around an open fire. And there's people in the crowd who recognize Peter. And aren't you one of his followers? And they ask him this question 3 times. And 3 times over, Peter denies even knowing Jesus. Jesus said this would happen. He said he would be betrayed. He said he would be denied. Here he was, all alone. They stand him in front of Pilate. The crowds of people, the city is packed with people. It's a time of festivity. And as part of the routine, and it was during this time of year that Pilate would release a prisoner that the people would request. Well, there was a man by the name of Barabbas. He was in the barracks. He was a notorious murderer. And again, the leaders were accusing Jesus of all kinds of things. And Pilate was like, this doesn't add up, guys. This man seems to me, from my perspective, is innocent. In fact, it's in that moment where his wife kind of calls him over and says, you don't want anything to do with this man's crucifixion. There is something about this Jesus you want your hands to be clean from. But Pilate gets peer pressured by the crowds. It's just too insurmountable. Pilate finally asks Jesus, who are you? Who do you say that you are? Are you truly professing to be the Son of God, the King of the Jews? Jesus says, yes, I am. And one day you will see me seated at the right hand of the Father. In that moment, the crowds begin to cry out, give us Barabbas. Give us that Barabbas. Set him free as one of the prisoners. And Pilate says, well, what do we do with this Jesus who says he's the Son of God? And they cry out, crucify him. Crucify him. Crucify him. Pilate washes his hands clean. He gives over Jesus to the soldiers. They take him and they tie him to a pole. And let me tell you, they whip him. They whip him so badly that his back is completely raw. Strands of skin hanging off his back. They put a a thorn, a crown of thorns over his head. They mock him, they blindfold him, they flog him. One soldier punches him and begs him to prophesy, to say who just did that. They rip at his beard. They completely humiliated him. He's been through 3 beatings. He hasn't even gone to the cross yet. It's amazing that he's still alive. They try to put him to a wooden plank. He's got to carry his cross down the Via Dolorosa. He's got to make his way up Golgotha Hill. It's called Skull Hill. It's a place that's the darkest place. It's where people are murdered or crucified. He doesn't even have the strength to carry the cross up. And so the soldiers grab a man, Simon, from the crowd and say, carry the cross for this Jesus who claims to be the King of the Jews. In fact, they write it, inscribe it on a sign, and they placard it on top of his cross. They bring him there and they drop the cross and they lay Jesus down on it. And you know what happens? They take 5, 6-inch spikes and they spike his feet into the cross. And spike his hands against this cross. And in humiliation, they hang him there. Even as he hangs there, he has to hear of the mockery of the soldiers below, of the thieves beside him. In his most darkest moments, he even cries out to God, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why? And in his last breath, he breathes, it is finished. You might be here this morning saying, why did he do all of that? Why did he allow himself to be humiliated like that? He's the God of the universe. He's the King of kings. He could have called down a legion of angels at any moment. He did it because he loves you, friend. He did it because he loves me. He did it because he wants to touch the lonely. He did it because he wants to heal your pain. He did it because he wants to bring peace where there's frustration. He wants to heal your family. He wants to heal your marriage. Where you feel worthless, he wants to breathe validation in your life. Where you have done foolish things, he wants to blanket you with grace and mercy. Where you have resentment, he wants you to be able to drop that resentment and find healing in your life. Where there are addictions, friends, trust me in this, his power is enough for you to free you. I've seen it. And you might say, oh, no. He does. It happens for other people, but not me. I mean, there is no way. Yes, there is a way, and his name is Jesus. The same power that arose him from the dead is available to you this morning. I'm hopeless, friend. He's here to give you hope. He's here to give you life where there is despair. But you have to get to the point where you say, I can't do this anymore. You have to confess it. You have to say, I tried everything. I've tried professionals. I've tried relationships. I've tried to be intimate with other people. I've tried counseling. I've tried it all. And I'm worse than before. I need help. Friend, your help comes from Jesus today. I'm going to call the worship team up at this time. We all have confessions. You're looking and you're hearing from a guy who needs a Savior just as much as you need a Savior today. We serve a Jesus who extends his hand of mercy to you today, who extends his hand of grace to you today because he loves you. How great the love of God. The worship team is going to lead us in this song, and Krista's going to use her voice to the glory of God. But in many ways, I don't want you to be distracted by any of us up here. I want you to focus in right now on Jesus. And I want you to see him as your Savior. He wants to be your Savior. And he wants you to see how amazing his love is. He wants you to have an experience like you've never had before. Good Friday 2015, I believe God has a desire to make it a turning point in your life and in mine. Are you willing to share your confession to Him today? Where do you need your Savior to walk into today?